whiteboard for the first time. But, we're talking about one-on-ones, and then we're talking about custodians.
The third group that I could add to that, food service workers, please.
Food service.
And I would suggest it would be valid to add secretarial.
I was going to say everybody on this policy we just read. You know,
So that would include secretarial, right?
there's maintenance staff, speech therapists, paraprofessionals. Well, we called them instructional assistants, so they are actually on there already. Cafeteria workers, secretaries.
How about program specialists, which I think are part of your policy as well?
They're part of the policy as well, yeah.
Okay, where would that put them on this list then?
Well, they're educational
support,
assistants,
these
so.
would be-
No, they're not. They're not classroom personnel.
What's that?
So, program specialists are not. See, the definition I see from my perspective is that in classroom personnel is what you're trying to address.
Mm-hmm.
And people who are not in classroom personnel but are just in the, part of the operations of the district, they might be educational based, but they're not in classroom personnel. There's only
Right.
12 specific positions in the district that are
Okay.
program specialists, and there's one person in each of those positions. So I would suggest to you that they could be on the replaceable immediately list, from my perspective. No, down below.
Down below, he's talking about the operational
Well,
staff.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
originally talked about this portion of the support staff being included, and there seems to be a consensus that we want them to be replaceable immediately.
As well as custodians, food service, secretarial.
Right. So now the list looks like just that. One-on-one, for lack of a better description.
I would like to add the academic interventionist to the replaceable immediately because the data from that program proves that it's working and ultimately reducing special education needs. You look puzzled, Dan. Is that not true?
No,
Oh, okay.
Could I weigh in a little bit on this? There are some positions that are key positions that, without which operations are going to come to a grinding halt. We just witnessed this it was a particular secretarial position at the time of the year when we have a lot of data that needs to go to the state, et cetera. Our principals know which positions they could have a month's flexibility and which ones they can't. The academic interventionist, if we were missing one of those for a while, we may be able to get by for a shorter period, for a little bit of time, versus, you're saying one-on-ones, there are IEPs that do demand classroom support assistants to be there. And if we were, I mean, like I said, we're constantly looking to overhaul our program and lean it out. But if, for example, there's a 2-on-1 or a 3-on-1 or a one person that's supporting 6 kids in the classroom, and that person gives us 2 weeks' notice, and then 2 weeks later we have a board meeting, the parents of those 6 kids would have every legal right to say, you're not providing what my child's IEP cites that they need to have.
Isn't that what?
They're not one-on-ones, those are classroom support people, they're not academic intervention, those are 1200s. Where academic interventionists are 1100s. So I think one of the suggestions that was made last meeting in part of the conversation was, could we go to the chair or vice chair and say, could we make the case to say, this is a key essential personnel issue. Can we have your permission to begin the hiring process more quickly than waiting till the next meeting? I just feel like we could sit here and theoretically talk about which custodians or food service or secretaries, and there may be some positions that we could wait, but there could be those situations that do arise that say, we've really got to replace that person right away. And I would never, if you look at I should have brought a blank HR form. We have a personnel change form, and on it, it says to the principals when they are requesting a personnel change, it says the name of the person, who is this person replacing, or additional position approved by the board on what date. So there is no chance that anyone would hire someone that we would process through our HR department, any employee, that you did not approve the position. And what I would like to ask you is that, because when year to year, or you could review it in a while, to say you approved our list of positions with certain names in them. If a name leaves, we'd like to replace that position, because we've got an HR form that does it. If we needed to add an additional position, which you will hear me ask about tonight later, then we would come to the board and get approval to add a position. But we're asking permission to replace current positions, and then we can inform the board on a regular basis which of those transitions have occurred over the month. But I don't know, for operations, I think we're being, I don't want to, I feel like our hands are being tied and we're being micromanaged at that level. So I would like to have permission to replace positions that you've already authorized the positions.
And that would leave us exactly where we were under current procedure.
Well, currently, we didn't come to you and tell you at
Right.
all. We never come and tell you
Right.
how many of those we
The
replace.
budget's approved and the positions are there.
Right, we never tell
and
you how many we switch on.
You
So-
just keep them filled.
Right, so my
I think
point
that's
is,
the philosophical issue
Right.
that we have as a board. In trying to keep things where they are,
Mhm.
and with respect to the number of students in the district, maintain acceptable ratios. This being a way to do that.
That's kind of back to my point, you know, how often do you review whether you need that position or not?
we do that.
You're only saying, well, you've never said that, I'll come to the board and eliminate a position.
We review them annually, and during the budget process, we look position by position and say, what can we live without? And for example, we reduced a secretarial position in a smaller school by half-time. We reduced, last year, we reduced the special ed secretary from 7 hours a day to 7.5 at Bristol. We reduced, so we,
Can I interrupt? That's only annually, you just said.
right.
Yeah, that's true.
So what I'm
You know,
suggesting to do is if we
Why
report to
not
you.
have something that allows you to make an assessment
Mhm.
during the year?
Well, we could
Not
do that on a
just
rotating,
annually.
what I'm suggesting is we can report to you, and we can keep track of any transitions that happen. We can, and we do, every time we have a vacancy, we look to see, can we live without it? I say to the principals, can you substitute another personnel? Can you consolidate duties? We could report that on an ongoing basis, and you could review it quarterly. But to say that we have to come for every replacement, I think is going to become tedious for all of us, you yourselves included.
Do you thought maybe after you get the legal advice, we'd be better equipped to handle this?
For the special ed section or portion, certainly that would be a point well made.
I hate to table it again, but once you get the ins and outs, we can make an intelligent decision, and, I mean, we can leave it like that temporarily if you want.
Well, to Marie's point, that the parents of special ed children that may be affected, that don't have one-on-ones, I would submit to you that there has to be reasonable time for us to go through the process to address the issue. And in the interim, we would expect that the administration would make interim choices, as you've
Which we
done
do,
in the
right.
past, you continue to do. And so it wouldn't be unreasonable for us to be able to consider at the next board meeting as a priority whether or not we want to continue with that position, to hear what the superintendent's proposal may be to address it, should we decide not to. So I don't think it's unreasonable to take the posture that we want to manage the personnel to the extent that we have a growing concern here and understand what we can do about it. So yes, your point is that getting the advice on the topic is probably a good way to go. But I noticed Sue had a comment. I'd like to hear from her.
Well, no, I think that the time to talk about the positions is when you're building the budget. And we certainly cut some positions last year. I don't think you can do it all year long on an individual basis like that. I feel that the people who are hired to replace people probably are going to be necessary.
So businesses do it all year long. They eliminate people by attrition. I mean, it's not uncommon.
Right?
Lloyd?
Yeah, these TBDs now you had on this, for this year on here, there's 4 or 5 of them in here. Have they been filled now or what? It's still just TBD? The money's there and the position's there, but we've no move to fill them yet.
Right.
Are they needed?
That's out of respect for this discussion.
Right, I've been
Yeah,
on
that's
hold.
what I'm wondering, but I mean, we're talking about filling the ones that leave with TBDs.
Well,
These are extra, so to speak.
But
yes, the discussion is focused around what are we going to do with non-professional collective bargaining staff, if you
Right.
will, contract staff, when in fact a position turns over. And this is an extraordinary year, and that's why this discussion is even occurring, because to Sue's point, it would always be done in the fall. The budget would be carved in stone, and whatever we had, we had. This year, we're looking at it a little more closely, and since we made all these changes, the question is whether or not we're going to allow the administration to continue to just put people in replacement positions without taking the time to look at why they left and what the reasoning would be to replace them. Could be that a person leaves a position on the other side of the spectrum because there's way too much to do and they can't handle it anymore, and it should be 2 people. We may discover that in our evaluation. So that's where we're coming from on the discussion.
I
Marie?
appreciate your last comment, and to that point, I said last week, and I don't mean to be redundant, but we downsized $2.3 million. This is an extraordinary year. We haven't tried this out. We haven't seen the impact of our system on all the cuts we did make. And we did go line by line, person by person, and said, what can we possibly live with less? And I'm hearing you ask us to say, let's continue to let go of more positions because someone left, without us even seeing the impact of those very deep cuts.
That's not what we're asking. What we're asking is to review the positions when attrition occurs.
Right.
That's very different than to commit to non-renewal
Right,
of those
right.
positions. So while we're not saying that we are going to eliminate through attrition positions, what we are saying at this point is we want to take a look at that, and they've been alluded to as TBDs because there are a few that need to be considered that are in the budget. And the question remains whether or not we're going to allow administration to do that in all categories, or specifically in those that, as Ruby mentioned, we seem to be a little heavy on, for lack of a better term. Now, to that end, Paul mentioned regarding other discussion that we're going to have in this particular area to expand upon our special ed situation in the district. Perhaps we could get some guidance on what our choices would be in that area if we wanted to wait until we got that consultation, which means we would need to put this back on the table at this point. In the interim, between now and what would be at least July 1st, when the new fiscal year starts, we have to have some guidance for the superintendent and our business manager on what we're going to end up doing here. So I think narrowing it down to the area of special ed, and I wanted to be more explicit here and thorough for accuracy purposes, by name, category name. We have custodians, we have secretaries, we have food service.
I would just caution when you use the word administration.
Okay, well, I wish someone corrected me before I put
And it
something-
says secretaries in our policy.
We call them school secretaries sometimes, and we call,
Their contracts say administrative assistants.
administrators.
That's true.
Dan, Vinnie, can I ask Dan to address the
Sure.
board on the question of lapse of health insurance coverage? I have, for example, I know.
Before you
Okay.
do that,
Because of the date.
are there other categories here, Dan?
I'd like to put program specialists under replaceable immediately.
Okay, and then it begs the question,
What is the
what are
program
we
specialist?
left with?
That's not on that list now.
Yes, on this.
1,200, 114, employees paid through accounting functionality, 1,200, 114,
Yeah.
that are not designated one-on-one.
And
So,
those
for
are-
example, you have many people
Those
that
are called special ed support staff, generically.
correct. But
Some of them are different,
some are one-on-ones, some are two-on-one, some are six-on-one.
right, but they're special ed support staff.
Correct.
These are the accepted ones. Sped support staff. Okay. None of which, or none of whom are program specialists
Correct.
or academic interventionists.
Correct.
Okay. Can you estimate the number of employees, there's about 33 of these,
It's 36.
36?
Then I would put the other number,
It's gotta be over 30.
I was gonna say somewhere between 40 and 50.
Yeah.
I'm thinking a two-on-one is as demandable as one.
That's my concern, that why you may want to think about putting it on the right side of the column, is because even though it's not a one-on-one, it's still a service mandated by an IEP. It's called access. The student must have access. If you look at the previous documentation provided last month, you talk about access. So you might have 3 people in a classroom because there's 14 kids in it that need
Right.
access.
Now, let me address that specifically. Given the current situation, when you have someone leave, no matter what their role is, you find a way to address that until you can find a replacement employee. That doesn't happen in one day. It doesn't happen in 7 days in some cases, and certainly in 14 days. We usually have a meeting every 14 days of some sort. So we would not be handling this in an extraordinary manner if we just said, please bring it to the board before you make an automatic replacement. Am I wrong with those numbers?
We would tend to cover it like if somebody was absent, if Paul needed an IEP aid because he needed one-on-one, but he was out that day, we might shift that aid over, et cetera. I mean, we cover, like you said, in the interim. So, again, if we can get to the board every 14 days, that's fine. My concern with the July 1st thing is, right now I have a TBD, which is a one-on-one TBD, and you're gonna let me replace that person.
Perhaps
Because I
so,
can
yeah.
bring someone back who's been riffed.
Right.
And I want to bring her back before July 1st to get her on contract, because otherwise her whole health insurance is going to lapse. And, right, am I right about that?
Well, they'll resume coverage the first month following employment. So they won't go a year without it, they would just go.
But I mean, there might be a couple of months,
It's the first
because
month-
of our decision.
It's the
to-
first of the month following employment.
My point is, because of our decision to reduce positions, we did not hand out support staff contracts to everyone we had this year. We reduced the number that we handed out. I have a couple people who do not currently have a contract. If we don't come to the board until July, then they're not going to be able to start their health coverage. They're going to miss a month of, you see what I'm saying? I think.
You're talking about continuity, right?
Yes,
I understand that.
yes.
So between now and then, the next opportunity under our non-public would be at the P&D meeting
Mhm.
to bring forth a RIFT employee to bring back to us for nomination for exactly that purpose, to recognize that there will be no lapse in health coverage. I understand the issue.
All right, thank
So
you.
doesn't the health coverage last through August?
Not for all employees.
That's
Depends on
what I
when they
needed.
started and through the teachers, it's guaranteed through August. So these are non-teaching positions we're discussing.
And can I clarify, I don't think we're talking about nominating people, we're talking about approving positions.
Correct.
Yeah,
No.
so,
No, I think we're
No.
talking about nominating people.
You already approved the positions. They exist. We're
Okay,
saying
so-
nominating people to fill the vacancy in a current position.
we're not gonna look at the resume. We would be looking at whether or not the position was
Right, the
necessary.
discussion is on whether or not the TBD, in this case, the vacant position,
Can be filled.
can be filled based on what the current situation is. Do the number of students merit it? Does the does the IEP require it? And what have you? We just want to look at that. So-
There's not many rifts left, are there?
There were a few more in the support staff that we didn't
I'm
give
talking
contracts.
teachers.
No, the teachers, there are a few more, a couple more, maybe 3, that we haven't brought back yet.
So there ended up being none, really, right?
There's 3 currently, 4, 3.
Sue?
Well, so are you saying that she would have to get permission from the board and before she even advertised, because at this point, it takes a while to fill the position, yes, and you cover until you fill it, but
What-
now this is gonna push it back even further
Well,
to
what
fill
we're
it.
looking at is, within reason, is maximum about a 14-day maximum.
I'm
timeframe.
just saying, does that mean before you advertise for the position?
Well, let's clarify that. I think if we've decided, if it comes before the board and you've made an interim decision to cover it somehow, or we'll say up to 14 days, and then comes before the board, if we want to make certain that the position's merited and we decide it's not merited and then we don't have the position anymore because we want to eliminate it, then there's, whatever coverage you've got is going to be maintained in that manner. And we would not refill it. So
But-
you wouldn't advertise for it in advance until it's approved, for
But
that
if,
reason.
yeah, but if you
So
do
then
approve
it's
the
another 2
position,
weeks.
Right.
then it's a few more days before it goes in the paper.
That's correct.
So now you've used up the possibly 2 weeks, plus another few days.
Correct.
And there has to be some guidelines as to when, how long you have to give these people to apply.
If an emergency
And then-
equals specialty.
Well, it could be a couple months.
Well, I don't know that it would go a couple of months. I don't see
Because you
that.
have a deadline to apply, and then
Well-
you consider the applications. I don't know.
The principals already say it can take weeks in their letter. But I have a question, and now I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, Marie, I'm sorry. How many support staff were RIF'd?
We riffed 5
Five.
academic interventionist positions, but then you said that you'd like to transfer 2 special ed back into that column.
Right.
And I just want to assure, especially Yuri Hayek as a new member, Don as a new member, and you as a new member, that every employee that we did nominate currently corresponds to a very careful scrutiny by our staff as to need as defined in an IEP. Now, we're going to look at the process again about can we do those things differently, but we were very cautious about not, and that's why there are a couple of TBDs on there. And I have gone back to the case managers for special ed and said, can you do this in a different way? Can you provide some technology that could help with tutoring, or can, you know, we're constantly looking at that. So I just want to assure you that we have the same mind as far as the process of every time we have an opening, we look to make sure that we can't consolidate it. We always think that. And we may have differing thresholds about that. And so I just want to assure you and the public that we do have that mindset. And we
I could also just add, for example, in addition to the 5 classroom support staff RIFs, we reduced one of the custodial staff from full to part-time this year,
and 2 secretary
And-
positions,
and 2 secretaries from full to part-time.
Administrative position.
administrative assistant. But we call her the guidance secretary.
Yeah.
So just a clear example of when contracts came out for support staff, and this custodial member found that they were going from full-time to part-time. It was a sit-down discussion, it wasn't just an envelope that they opened up. They, the time determined it, they resigned, and effective immediately. And so in a building with just 2 personnel, one during the day when the students are there, one at night for cleaning, it was helpful for us to be able to replace with a 5-hour-a-day person instead of an 8-hour-a-day person, without coming
Right.
through the process.
And I don't think that's unreasonable, okay? To the point that the concern is over the size of the support staff vis-à-vis other districts, as we've compared ourselves to. That's where the genesis of this concern has emanated from. So,
See, I think that has to be another conversation. I think it has to be a larger conversation. When we're studying that, that's when we figure these things out.
I think
And
along
then
the
people
lines
can be
of
moved.
Paul's comment, perhaps we should focus on that as part of the overall issue and get guidance on what our option's going to be, because it does fall under special education, and that was our concern.
I have a suggestion. My suggestion, along with what you just said and what Paul said, is that we do table it one more time, and that when we get the guidance that we need from the attorney on this, we possibly it won't be as harsh as us saying, you can't do this. It might be more along the lines of us embedding it in the goal that we currently put aside until we get more guidance. And so it might be one of Marie's goals.
Which we reserve the right to change and/or modify, add to, or delete from at any time during the year.
And we would report on that on a monthly basis, and to Don's point, it isn't just a once-a-year look at it, the board could look at it monthly and say, what positions, we could put in a report, what positions became vacant, the rationale for why we thought they were a key position and we needed to hire, and what positions we could consolidate.
Yeah. I think the whole point of our discussion is that we want to have a great deal more scrutiny on personnel matters with respect to how we're running the district. That's the 100,000-foot level. So, I hear a motion to table, which is non-debatable. Is there a second? Okay, it's moved by Ruby and seconded by Paul to retable the motion in favor of additional consultation. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. Okay, motion to retable passes. Now, I have a question for you. I will attempt to get the consultation underway as soon as possible. In the event that we don't resolve this before July 1st, everyone should be aware that everything is status quo as it has been in the past. So there's no confusion on Marie's part. Okay? So, that being said, unless there's a change or another way to deal with that, that clarifies the issue. And I want to thank the principals for submitting their input on this topic to us. Okay, that brings us now to the question on item 10I, which is to whether or not we are going to have discussion about making a formal request to the Newfound Area Teachers Association to negotiate their agreement. What's the board feeling on that?
We are so moved.
Second.
Okay, there's going to be a motion under action. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I would say that item should be presented for consideration on the consent agenda. Could you add that for me, please, Marie? That brings us to other business, 10Z. First item on item 10Z is Marie's request to add another first grade. You want to go ahead and speak to that?
In non-public, I showed the board that we have reached, we've surpassed the recommended guideline and limit. The state recommends that we keep our class size in K through 2, kindergarten through second grade, to a maximum of, to no more than 20 where possible, but maximum of 25. Within the last 2 weeks, we have had 7 new registrations for first grade in the New Hampton Community School, and therefore we're up to 30. And I have called the state and gotten permission to use our Title IIA class size reduction funds, so I can add an additional classroom teacher with grant money out of Fund 22 with no additional taxpayer dollars out of Fund 10. So my request would be for the board to approve the addition of an additional teacher in grade 1 at the New Hampton Community School. And then, if you approve, I will advertise and bring that name to you for nomination.
And can I just add, I think you've talked about this before, you can use those funds for 2 years, right?
You can use them for 3 in the same position, but you can't supplant district obligation. So if you know that you're going, if we knew that we were going to have
This large class for
again
3
next
years.
year, we should plan it in the district budget next year. And now that the reason that we were unaware was I guess there's a new private, we should have anticipated, I suppose, there's a new private school in town that is a full-day kindergarten, and as well as some other grade levels. And so we didn't realize that some parents had opted to send their children there instead of the public kindergarten, and they were not on our radar.
Yeah.
So now that we're aware that happened this year, we'll anticipate that more next year, and we'll look at enrollment in that school and ask parents what their plans would be for the following.
Any other questions on the addition of the first grade? Okay.
If another grade exceeds the maximum allowed in any of the other schools, as well as New Hampton, will those grants be available for that grade as well?
They're only available in K-1-2, I believe, and it depends. Again, it has to be something that you could not have anticipated or you did not anticipate. So this year we're funding 3 positions, and we're maxed out on as Ruby said, we can't use them beyond the 3rd year. So there is about $95,000 in the grant, so we only funded a half of one. It was the half of the kindergarten teacher in one school, and then a portion of another class size reduction, because we didn't have enough to fund 3 full teachers. So if you look at the teacher with FICA, retirement, and benefits, it's going to eat up most of that, and we wouldn't be able to afford another full-time, I doubt. So if that should occur, then if that should occur, then we're going to be coming to you saying, hey, we consolidated other positions because we had to, regardless of any other reason. In fact, before I got permission today, I went to Dan and said, Dan, we were going to come up with this money because we have to split this class.
Any further discussion? Okay, hearing none. I'm going to keep this one off of the consent agenda. We'll move on to other business, item Z2, which is additional grant revenues for audit preparation.
I'd like to start by apologizing. The number in my report is misstated. And here's some numerical documentation for you on the subject. I'll print another copy for the secretary. What I would call your attention to is the column with the arrow above it, which is the variance calculation for this is one of my work papers that goes towards the auditors for auditing our fully authorized appropriation. The first couple of columns, starting from the left, it's by function, the accounting functionality we talk about a lot. The first couple of columns talk about the Fund 10, 21, and Fund 22 appropriation that went through the process, including first deliberative session and the voting at the polls. I then came to you in the fall, the next column, which says supplemental appropriation, which is Fund 22. That's when I came to you in the fall and said, okay, when we build the budget the year before, we estimate what we're going to have for grant revenues, but we don't have a solid line on it. And then I come to you in the fall and say, okay, this is the solid line of where we're starting. These are the approved grant amounts we have to start the school year. And you approved that additional $500,000+ in the fall. That's the corrected number. And then we had that one small artist donation, which was tied into that number as well. And then through the year, we've received some additional grant revenues. Typically, an example of that would be after the grant year winds out in the fall, the state goes through all its calculations and says, okay, we have a bunch of money in Title I from last year that didn't get used, so we're going to redistribute it. So we were recently offered a little more than $55,000 in Title I redistribution from the previous year, but because we're spending it this year, it has to be authorized as a part of our appropriation. So we get this additional grant revenue. It came in, they call us on May 1 and they say, if you use this by May 20th, you can have it. As long as you tell us in advance what you're going to do with it, and we approve it. But it's a very quick situation. They call us on May 1st. They say, you got 3 days to tell us what you're going to do with it if we give it to you. We tell them, they say, okay, but now you have to spend it by May 28th, and it has to be in students' hands by June 1st. So it's once again, this federal grant money that's funneled through the state. We see an opportunity to improve the environment at the students' hands, and we jump on it, and then we come to you and say, it's not going to cost the local taxpayer anything. Please accept it as part of our authorized appropriation. And so the number that's in my report is understated by approximately $20,000, but the number that's at the bottom of that column, I think is 96, is that the right number?
99,135.
99, thank you. That's the number that I would ask you to put in a motion to say something to the effect of, the school board authorizes the increase in the appropriation of Fund 22 and accepts these additional grant revenues in the amount of that number. And that way, by prior action of the district, you have legally increased the total appropriation at no local taxpayer's expense.
I'm happy to move that if you can write it down for
Sure.
Leah.
I apologize for not doing that in advance.
That's okay.
I'll have it for you shortly.
And Paul seconded.
Okay, when the time comes, we'll act on that as a until we get the motion, until a
I'll type it up here right
non-consent.
So that's gonna be Z2?
That's item Z2, action on Z2. Okay. Any further discussion on the matter?
I'd
Don?
like to ask how we spent the money, just in general.
Well, for example, a chunk of what you'll see is in the 2200 function. And so, for example, we took some of the Title I money and bought some iPads. We went out and looked at the cost of various tablet computers, and iPads were the cheapest. And so we bought some iPads, and we also bought, none of the iPads we had already had in district they were previously purchased with IDEA or special ed grant monies, could print, because you need a printer called an air-compatible printer to print from an iPad. So we bought some air-compatible printers and some iPads and put them in in the hands of our Title I students, specifically in the elementary schools. We put some of them in Bristol Elementary, some in New Hampton, and some in Bridgewater Hebron. So that's a large chunk of it.
That was 55,000.
That was,
55.
55,000 was the total amount, but we didn't spend that much on the iPads. We only spent about 25 on iPads. There are some additional, I could pull the information together for you. Once again, I've got it listed by function, because that's how my little world works. But some supplies, I think some money's being used for some summer school work. Or is that, no, that wouldn't qualify this year.
That's
Was there
why
anything-
I was asking.
Yeah, no, I understand.
John,
Yeah.
John, we
That
can,
quickly.
I can
That's-
prepare a report for you for the next meeting to detail how we spent all those funds.
But that's, yeah, a good portion of it. so.
Yeah, that's the majority.
Anything else on this topic? Otherwise, we'll move on to Z3, which is under Dan's report, item number 3. I refer you back to item 3. I'm sorry, item 4. Referring you back to item 4 of his report, which has to do with life insurance benefits to employees. Dan, would you care to comment on this a little further? Seems like you're just,
I'm just trying to follow some good business practices and get some competitive bidding out there, making sure that, in a case like this, it's in a product like life insurance, because it's not like buying apples or school buses or whatever. You really want to make sure there's so many flavors, if you will, there's so many different forms as insurance in the insurance business. You really want to spend some time and make sure that you're getting a comparable product. So this proposal that I'm basing my suggestion to you on is from a company called Lincoln Financial. That would be the underwriter, if you will, Lincoln Financial versus Carly's Horace Mann. It's nothing against Horace Mann, especially the rep who's worked with the district has worked with for a long time and does a great job. But we talk about saving every place we
we're
can.
doing what we're paying you to do.
Trying.
And this is just evidence of that.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on that item to allow Dan to move forward to get competitive bids?
And this is term life insurance.
This is term life insurance that the district procures for the benefit of its employees.
and no disability.
This is,
Or
any long-term
accident.
disability or accidental insurance is strictly procured at the employee's own expense. The district buys $20,000, I think the number's $20,000 a year, $20,000 policy for all full-time employees.
So do we need a motion to, because Dan says he's asking for guidance to, or permission to move forward, so do we need a motion?
I tell you, my attitude on that stuff is that we would expect and hope that the business manager would go forward with that. The reason we're being presented with it, I think, for consideration is to keep us informed, to offer guidance, to feel comfortable that he's doing that job. And at Dan's request, if he's asking for a motion, I feel very comfortable to put it forward as such.
Your
So,
choice.
It's up to us to do that, which is a matter of simple discussion here. We would be authorizing him to go forward as stated to bid competitively with alternative vendors to Horace Mann.
I think,
I'm not necessarily asking permission to bid. I'm asking
Right.
permission to have the flexibility to
Right.
move the business in the most appropriate manner, to the best financial advantage of the district.
and I want to say that I appreciate you bringing it to us. I think it doesn't require a motion, and for us to say, we move that you save $5,000 is very micro.
And I don't think that that's the intent here. I think he's just communicating
Right.
with us that he's,
So I think we
Finding an
can give
opportunity.
a verbal assent without a motion,
we
correct?
could, right, whatever the board's feeling is. I just let you know, I don't.
Just, you know,
Works for me.
is there anyone who has a thumbs down response to it?
Okay. Seeing none and no further discussion on it, then that will conclude our discussion, and then there is no 10Z for action. 10Z3, I'm sorry. Thank you, Mayor. That now brings us to public comment on only agenda items, which is item number 11. Is there any public comment from anyone remaining in the public? Mr. Robinson?
Fred Robinson, Danbury. Listening to the discussions this evening, especially about your policy on the TBDs, and your decision to put it back on the table, I feel is a very good decision. You are, again, you're looking at data saying that you have a problem. You haven't determined that you have a problem. And I think until you actually determine that you have a problem, that's when you look at the ways that you can solve that problem or find ways to alleviate some of the problems that you have. To try and alleviate problems on something that you feel you have a problem with is not the way to do things. And I think what you did tonight was a very good choice, so thank you.
Thank you. Okay. That now brings us to the consent agenda. And this evening, interestingly enough, for the first time, it's actually very easy. If I'm not correct, there's only one item that is not on the consent agenda.
I put 2.
Is it both Z1 and Z2?
You did not tell me to put the grant revenues on the consent agenda. I will if you would like me to.
Because we didn't have.
Thank
the
you.
motion.
We were waiting on,
Oh,
for the
Yes.
motion, yeah.
Okay, so do you want it now?
Here's the question. Right now, there are 2 items that are not on the consent agenda, the grant revenues and adding first grade. Is that correct? Is there a question or any objection to the consent agenda as it's structured? Sue?
I don't have a problem with that, but are we supposed to give some guidance to, oh, I guess that's going to come before the football field oversight committee about
Yeah, what has
the,
to happen there is they have to have a meeting and
Yeah.
discuss everything that
And bring it
Brian
to
presented
us.
tonight, and
Yeah.
then present it to the board. Like that,
Yep.
informative, with the exception of cutting grass that we'll
right.
speak to
Jim.
since we're under public comment. Would you have a public comment, Mr. Rossner?
I would, but I'm not a member of I'm not a resident of the district, so we tend to let me speak publicly. I did, during the meeting, email our facilities manager because I was surprised to hear what they said about the length of the grass. And the response I got was that their specific challenges in the last 2 weeks included the weather and prepping the fields for graduation.
Yeah.
And it's on the schedule for tomorrow.
Okay. Good, I'll check that off. Okay, so we're now back to the consent
Just make
agenda.
sure that he gets the grass off the field, doesn't leave it on the field with it being so high.
I don't know that we have the capacity to do that, to be honest with you.
Does it mulch?
Why don't we let facilities handle that, Dawn? We're talking about the consent agenda, item 12. The way this now works is, I'm gonna ask, are there any changes to the consent agenda as agreed prior?
Would you like me to review it?
No. Hearing none. This is why you want to pay attention. The consent agenda is to facilitate business. If there's objection to any item on the consent agenda, I would like to hear it now. We'll remove it for consideration. Hearing none, I would like to call for a vote on the consent agenda. All the items listed, which will be the legal sheet that is given to our clerk to record the vote on those items. All those in favor of the items on the consent agenda?
Don't you need a motion first?
We have to, do we have to move in second?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. I would entertain at this point a motion to move the consent agenda.
Sue
Sue
moved.
Sue moved and Paul seconded. Is there any discussion on the consent agenda? Yuri?
I have a discussion, the item 1A through all the minutes,
Yes,
right? I will have to abstain from those
that's fine. And this is when you want to
because I
mention that.
did not participate.
When we vote on it, you'll record your
So
abstention.
only that, the rest I can go.
Okay. This is a good example of why you should object to the consent agenda as structured, because you want to choose to record your vote a different way. The implication on the consent agenda is that it'll be passed,
Right.
okay? So I'm going to record your objection to the minutes being part of the consent agenda. Okay? I understand your reasoning behind it, but this is a lesson on how this will work. If there's anything you don't want to be approved, essentially, now's the time you have to speak about it. Otherwise, it's expected that you'll vote in favor. That's the whole idea behind it. So, there being objection to the minutes being on the consent agenda, those items have been removed.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
Could the board decide to have all the minutes pass as a block in line with jury?
We could, but we're not there yet.
Okay.
It's just removed from the consent
So you
agenda.
couldn't have like a double consent. Okay,
No.
that's-
Okay, the
Learning the
minutes,
process.
the minutes have been removed and they'll be considered accordingly. Motion's been made and seconded for the consent agenda as structured with removal of the minutes. Any further discussion on the consent agenda and its purpose? Hearing none, I would entertain a vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Okay, it's unanimous, Leah, 7-0. 0-0. That brings us now back to, in sequence, the minutes. And that is item 7A, removed from consent. Is there a motion to consolidate the minutes for a motion to pass all minutes as corrected?
Second.
Okay, Paul Reinhardt has moved to consolidate the minutes as corrected and seconded by Ruby Hill. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions?
Aye.
Okay, we have 6 in favor, no opposed, 1 abstention. Yuri, for your information, when there's a minority vote, we record the town of the minority vote cast. So, Leah, please record Groton as having abstained. Okay. That now brings us back to item Z1, which is adding the first grade. Is there a motion on the floor?
I move that we grant the superintendent's request.
Second.
Okay, motion to add an additional first grade class as requested by the superintendent is before the floor. It was moved by Ruby and seconded by Don Franklin. Is there further discussion? Hearing none, I would entertain a vote. All those in favor to add a first grade class as requested by the superintendent, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So it's moved by Ruby, seconded by Dawn. Vote was approved 7-0-0-0. Next item of business is item 10Z2.
Okay.
Is there a motion?
Yes. I move to accept and appropriate $99,136. This amount is entirely comprised of increased grant revenues, and none of these funds will be raised through local taxation.
Second.
Okay, hold on one second. So,
You want this?
I'd rather have this be given
Given to Leah?
to Leah.
Okay.
Okay.
You press that?
Okay, that motion is Z2. Reference 10Z2. That was made by Ruby, seconded by Paul. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed, no. Abstentions, 7-0 vote, Leah. Okay. If I'm not mistaken, I believe that now brings us to item 14, which is manifests. Are there any manifests to be presented?
You see what Dan's doing,
What's that all
because
about?
we don't have any to present, and I'm partly at fault too, because I didn't send a reminder email out to anyone, but we have April and May to have a second signature on. We have one part of April done by Dawn, yeah.
Okay, so we need a second signature. Leah, if you'd put this in, the second signature on April and May for the manifest, which we'd like to get done before our next planning and dialogue meeting, which is at the end of June, so that we can legally say that that money should have been paid. Need to approve
The 1st June will be available too.
April and May. Yeah, whatever's there, if you can get right through the month of June, obviously, that would be best.
Right.
So is Dawn volunteering?
He's very thorough.
It might be a group effort.
I'm just asking, are we just gonna
We can
note that it should
leapfrog,
get done,
too.
or are we gonna make sure it gets done?
Well, that's why I wanted in the minutes
Gary,
that,
if you want to set the time with me, I'd be happy to walk you through that process and show you what's going on.
yeah, I guess you and I spoke about that, so we could use her signature help.
Yes.
Okay, that now brings us to item 15, and I want to note the hour. It is 9:10
I know
p.m.
it. Paul and I are both very happy.
Which is proof that I think this change in process will help us, if I do say so myself. Now, that brings us to announcements, however, and I have a few. Under 15A, I'd like to offer special thanks to Joe's Downtown Tavern, who donated $500 to the Friends of Newfound Football and sponsored a spaghetti supper on, was it June 4th and 5th, or that Wednesday, whatever it was. And it was very good of him because he donated a portion of the proceeds to Friends of Newfound Football. and I had 2 spaghetti dinners that night. Also, the graduation ceremony this past Saturday during the glorious weather we had over the weekend went flawlessly, and I'd like to commend the entire district and its operations staff that saw fit to pull that off and send off our graduates as well as we did. And coming up on June 14th, we have 4 specific retirees that I'm aware of, there may be additional, that are going to be recognized in the auditorium along with years of service. So if you're interested in attending, that'll start at...
It will start with a staff appreciation breakfast instead of a cookout. You might want to talk about that.
Yes, with a staff appreciation breakfast in lieu of the planned cookout.
At 7:30.
At 7:30, and then we'll adjourn to the auditorium to meet with the staff briefly, and we'll be done by approximately 9:30.
We'll start at 8:15 with recognitions, and then you'll be done by 9:30 the latest.
Right.
May I
That
add that?
includes breakfast? 7:30?
Well, you're
No.
hosting the breakfast is the point, so
Yeah.
if any of you wish to contribute any kind of coffee, cake, or baked goods or whatever, just let me know, I will fill in the holes. So,
Not the bagels.
I won't fill in the holes, the donut holes, no. The reason to change it from the luncheon that we had previously done last year, we had an extra staff day last year, and my principals reminded me immediately that that's their checkout day, and they don't have time to come midday for the cookout and accomplish checking the teachers out of their classrooms. And they reminded me that last year we had had an extra day with staff because of a waived day for snow day. So we would like to do the cookout to open school next August, but we'll do a staff appreciation breakfast, and I'll set that up. But if someone would like to contribute anything, just let me know, and I will account for that. So if you just want to come and say hello to people and shake hands and say we appreciate you.
Continental breakfast?
Yeah, continental breakfast.
I don't have to cook eggs?
If you want to cook eggs for 250 people, Paul, you can just...
Not a problem.
We'll write you
The
down.
eggs are cooked.
Okay, so is it clear to everyone that we'd like to have volunteers to
Also,
handle the...
to know if the school board has a budget for something like this.
Yes. That's what we would have
So-
paid for the cookout with, so.
But by the way, the cookout is being postponed until first day of school.
August 22nd, circle the date.
And it should be added, just so the staff don't seem ungrateful, that there are so many moving buildings, that was a big part of the request, right?
Right.
August, what's the cookout now?
22. To Ruby's point, the staff was feeling a crunch of the time, and Eric Chase, I think, said it very nicely. He said the staff feels most appreciated that you waived the extra day for makeup. And at this point, with so many of them having to move buildings, it's a really hard thing for them to come for the cookout.
So
But they,
what time is the cookout?
in August 22nd,
Oh, we'll get to that.
Time,
11 o'clock.
11 o'clock?
But come to the
You gotta be
breakfast.
there early then.
Yeah.
You like
So
food.
Paul, 7:30, the latest, 7:30 this Thursday, the 14th, if you, for the end of year appreciation. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us now to school events, which you'll see in the attached sheet, number 16. If anybody has any questions or comments, now's the time. And then item 17 is the date of the next school board meetings, one of which is a planning and dialogue that is usually targeted for the fourth Monday of the month, which this month would be June 25th. Marie has asked to schedule that for the 27th so she could attend. If you care to comment further on that, you can do so, but my plan for that meeting is to have 5 topics covered as briefly as possible. One is, Marie has suggested that we discuss a strategic planning session to have a Woods meeting. And that's not her term, that's mine. A Woods meeting is used by Digital Equipment Corporation in the past, where when they wanted to do some strategic planning, they would get away from it all and just go out to the woods and spend a day or two doing that without interruption. And I don't mean that that's what we have to do, but the point is that we would dedicate ourselves to such planning. That will be discussed. Whether or not we'll do it, we'll determine at that meeting. The second thing is that we have asked the SAU to provide us with the package of administrative benefits for the administrative personnel that Mr. Belbin has asked for several times over the past, and we now want to get that to us in advance of the next couple of weeks so it can be looked at in detail and discussed at that evening.
Does it have to be Wednesday?
We haven't got to that yet. I wanted you to know what else we're going to talk about first. The plans to research a zero-based budget and perhaps a committee to consider doing that will also be addressed that evening, because that is a school board goal. And I want to just reiterate that in order for the goal to be accomplished, we have to decide what to do. And so we want to talk about that subject that evening. The next subject would be for me to report back to you on authorization regarding consultation with legal guidance on what we can do as a district on the topic of special education in general. And hopefully I will have that information by then. And then finally, we would adjourn into a non-public to have a strategy session on what we would intend to do with respect to negotiating the teachers' agreement this year. Now, that said, I guess I can formally advise the union that the board voted that we will want to go forward and ask them to come to the negotiation table.
And they are likewise
If
deciding.
possible.
I think the thing they were waiting for was to decide who their UNICERF director would be, because their typical formal letter, which the contract said either letter needs to be certified, would list the people that would be coming to the table.
Well, I'll work
Yep.
with you on that, but I
Okay.
think that's an action we need to go forward with. So those 5 areas: strategic planning, health benefit review, zero-based budgeting, research, report on special ed, and a non-public for strategy on negotiating, will be scheduled for a meeting called the Planning and Dialogue Meeting, which usually is for 2 hours on the 4th Monday of the month. Now, does anyone have objection to doing it on Wednesday, the 27th? Mr. Reinhardt? Okay, would you prefer to do it on another day? What other day would that be, considering not Monday, right?
I can't be here Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday.
Oh, really?
Well, I could, how long does it take to get back here from Marlboro? I could do Thursday. I have to be in Marlboro all day, but I can make it back, I think, in time.
Marlboro all day, Monday?
The commissioner has a conference for superintendents every year, and it goes Sunday through Wednesday, so that's why Monday and Tuesday are difficult for me. I could get back Thursday. I'm in another conference all day, but I could get back in time for Thursday night.
So that would be Thursday, the 28th.
Yeah, then we're pushing towards 4th of July weekend then. You
I know, well, the choices are now Wednesday or the 27th.
Or you could have it Monday, but I wouldn't be able to be here, so
Well, a week before.
you can have your conversations.
Put the Friday before, a week earlier. May 7th. And Wednesday.
Does she need to be here?
25th.
Monday.
What's the board pleasure on that? Remember, the topics are to talk about strategic planning, health benefits package, research on zero-based budgeting, and the attorney for special ed.
Does the third Monday work? Does a week from tonight work for people?
The alternative, pardon me?
There won't be enough time for the health
Attorney
benefits.
with a legal
Oh,
counsel.
we have those ready. We can
Well-
get them out to you right away.
The health benefits I don't see as a problem. I think, I don't know what I could do
That'd be the 18th.
on a legal consultation, but we could take that in stride.
I almost think we shouldn't take that in stride because we've tabled this discussion twice, and it was definitely an area of concern for the voters, so I think we need to,
Well, it doesn't mean I can't get it done, it just, if I can't, then
What about the Thursday? Can we all meet the
The
Thursday?
28th?
Yeah.
yeah, I can do that.
That's getting
Is there anyone who
close to seeing
cannot
clock
do
will
it?
taking off.
But you leave, because I have meetings on the 3rd and the 5th of July. So I'm only taking the 4th off.
Thursday, what time?
be 6:30.
6:30?
Will you attend, Lloyd? We can do it
Thursday,
Thursday?
28th?
Yeah.
Possible, but it's kind of hard. I don't know. I'm supposed to, I'm trying to have a vacation schedule and I'm going to go to Maine with my boy and I don't know, over the 4th, so I don't know how early we're going, because I got to get back for doctors.
Yeah.
Vinnie, I
So-
think these topics are all things that the board wants to talk about amongst the board. I don't know that it matters that I'm here or not.
Yeah, they're all good, important things.
Except possibly the retreat, right, because you had,
Except that, yeah,
Had an
but
interest
I'm a
in
little,
we could talk about that the next time. What do you think?
Would Dan's input be enough?
And the benefits and the budgeting, we're volunteering you, Dan.
So,
I'd like to take a stab at the 28th on
Say
Thursday,
February.
and we'll keep it short, Lloyd.
It's a long reach to Maine.
6:30?
28th, 29th, 30th,
6:30.
1st, 2nd, 3rd, yeah. I have to get back for.
That way, the superintendent can attend. I think you
Yeah.
could do it without her, but I prefer not to. Okay, so then we will schedule the meeting for planning and dialogue on Thursday, June 28th. Please make a change on your agenda.
We'll email.
Yeah, there'll be an agenda presented for that. And the next regularly scheduled board meeting will be 2 weeks after that, roughly a week and a half, on July 9th. Okay? We're now at item
July
18,
9th.
concluding business for the posted meeting time at 9:24. Is there a motion to do so?
Yep.
9:24 PM.
You're slipping, Paul.
I know, I beat you to it.
Paul, you're
Made by Ruby, and who would like to second that motion?
Second that.
Sue Kenny has seconded it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The ayes have it, the motion